Hello YouTube, I'm Jack Clark, the Yugi Musketeer. As you can tell, I'm a bit wind down. Ugh. This is my second video today, and I plan to get another one out to you today as well. So yes, I did spoil you, but I've done many takes of this because of whatever reason. But this is going to be a direct video response to Vanjay7. Vanjay7, if you don't already know, is a fellow Watt player, and he did a video in regards to what not to run in a Watt deck, most specifically an AggroWatts deck, which I personally run. He gave me somewhat of a shout out. He mentioned me, and I think he wanted my opinion directly as well. So I thought, show common courtesy and give him a video response. So yes, in the video, he had been having a conversation, or an argument, I'm not quite sure, with an unknown Watt duelist on YouTube, who was suggesting various cards which he thinks Vanjay7 should advocate and use. But Vanjay7 thought, these are terrible ideas, and I have to, I'm going to go through the cards, and yeah, that's really the case. Some of these are terrible, so I'm just going to highlight what cards not to use, which may seem like a good idea in Watt. Of course, some of these cards may be good in other things, but just not in Watt. The first card, of course, is Ego Boost. Ego Boost is a common in Photon Shockwave, in which, at attack declaration, you can increase the attack of a monster by 1,000, I think. It's along those lines. So you can use it offensively and defensively, so if your opponent attacks, you can activate it and give the attack target 1,000 attack, hopefully protecting it. The problem with that is that most Watt monsters have very low attack points in the first place, so if they've got like more than 2,200 or more than 2,000 attack points, then the most likely your monster's going to be destroyed with or without the Ego Boost, which kind of sucks. In addition, of course you can use it when you attack, so you can do 1,000 more damage with one of your direct attackers, of course. But the main problem with Ego Boost is the fact that it is a -1. And of course, it may be able to protect you from natural card advantage lost. So one of your monsters being destroyed, but Ego Boost can protect it. Yeah, that protects you from a natural card advantage loss. So at best, it is a neutral in card advantage, but it's just not worth using because the Watt deck, they need to maintain their advantage throughout the entire duel. So it's best to use cards that are not negative and are not neutral. Neutral at best, to be fair. Just because they need to maintain their hand advantage, they need to maintain their back row, just so they can actually function well. But yeah, that's quite important. So Ego Boost, no. And the same applies to Photon Lead. Of course, Photon Lead actually is much better in Hopper Watt, simply because the negative it gives in terms of card advantage is kind of outraged by the fact that you can use it to piece together your Hopper Lock much more faster than you would be able to without it. Of course, Watt players, more experienced Hopper Watt players, do find that you'd only really want one copy, because also you don't want to draw it either way, because it's not very particularly good card. Of course, the theory behind its inclusion in AggroWatts is that you would attack directly with Cobra and add a Watt direct attacker to your hand, and then of course you would activate Photon Lead and some of the one that the Watt that you just added to your hand and attack again for more damage. Like I said though, it's a situational play. I mean, it's just not worth using. You want to kind of maintain, like I said, you want to maintain the card advantage you have in your hand and on the field. So running cards like Photon Lead and Ego Boost is just not worth using in the long run. Another card that Vanjay7 mentioned in his video, which this mystery duelist advocated, was Doomcaliber Knight. And Doomcaliber Knight is a terrible card in most things, actually. I think the only real use it has is in Chaos. But even then, it's quite hard to work around, especially, and it's borderline. It's impossible to work with in Watt, simply because, now of course, everyone who knows Doomcaliber has to activate upon the activation of an effect, and negate it and destroy it. Of course, Watts, they attack directly. Of course, the effect to attack directly is a continuous effect, so that doesn't activate. But when they do attack directly, they have to activate their secondary mandatory effect. So Giraffe has to stun everything. Cobra has to search for something. Pheasant has to remove from play a monster. In some cases, it will have to remove itself because you have no other targets. But that's the thing, they have to activate. So you can't even set up your field with your win condition and then summon Doomcaliber. You have to it's just so, why would you run Doomcaliber? It's stupid. Don't even think about Doomcaliber in most things. Sucky. Another card that he also mentioned was the Tour Guide Engine and Blackluster Soldier, because of course of very high light count, including Tour Guide increases the dark count, which means you can necessitate a Black Cluster Soldier. Now, of course, Vanjay7 also said this isn't very good, and I have to agree. You do not use Tour Guide in Watts, simply because you don't need it. Now, and it's, of course, many duelists will say, oh, it's not that you don't need it, it's just because you can't afford it. No, it really doesn't. I mean, I've tested it, it's really not good. What I would say is that I advocate the use of Tour Guide in most things, but most things attack monsters. The Watt duelist, they bypass your opponent's monsters completely, and they don't need to mess with them at all. I mean, your opponent opens with a Tour Guide, goes into Zen mains, and all sorts on their first turn. They go crazy on their first turn. But the Watt players don't care. We don't care about Zen mains. We don't care about your Leviathan Dragons and your Utopias, because we can get around them really quite easily. Especially Zen mains. God, so easy to get rid of with Pheasant. So... And of course, there are no rank 3s that Watts can benefit from. We don't banish any of our cards, so Levier is pointless. We don't attack monsters, so Leviathan Dragon, no use really. The only Xyzs we use are Utopia, just for added stall. But even then, we very rarely use it. But of course, using Tour Guide just to necessitate the fact that we run Sangan and you could potentially run Black Cluster. Of course, Black Cluster attacks as well. Much easier to disrupt, and of course, it does actually make the deck more inconsistent. So I can't say that you can use Tour Guide. It's just not worth it in a Watt deck. Worth it in most other things, but not in Watts, because they don't attack monsters. They attack directly, and there aren't any cards that can help. But yes, he also said that you probably don't need an extra deck. Well, this mystery Watts duelist said you don't need an extra deck. There's no reason not to run an extra deck. However, Watts, of course, I must say though, but if you can't run an extra deck, if you don't have the cards, then you can get away with it in a Watt deck. The only cards that I would say you definitely need is that if you run the Watt tuners, run the Watt synchros, especially Chimera, at least 2 copies. But if you don't run the tuners, minimum that you can run that you should run is number 39 Utopia. That's pretty much the bare minimum. But yeah, this video is already 7 minutes. I'm going to round it up because the last thing I wanted to talk about, Vanjay 7 had a problem with his AggroWatt deck, and I'm quite glad that he brought it up because it's a very good point that I think that most people, that if you run Watts or if you're thinking of running Watts, that you should know is that Vanjay has had a problem with his deck because he has had points where he has had his opening hand, or he's just had a hand of monsters which he hasn't been able to defend because he just doesn't have the protection. He doesn't have the back row retention. He's got a handful of monsters and they can't protect themselves. And I'm glad that he pointed it out, simply because this is a problem that has been encountered by primarily the Pojo Watt community, and we have found ways to minimise and mitigate that problem. And of course, Vanjay, he suggested that we run a lower monster count. That's pretty much it. I quite like running 15 monsters. 15 monsters is very low, but it's kind of, with your monsters, you want to run the bare minimum. I still like running Infect Veiler and Honest and Sangan, but you want to run your minimum, and especially with your direct attackers, because although your direct attackers are your win condition, you don't want to run max out. You don't want to go free Cobra, free Giraffe, free Pheasant, because like Vanjay has discovered, is that you get hands that you can't do anything with. So what I quite like is although I do quite like being able to draw into my direct attackers, as a rule of thumb, run more back row protection than you do monsters. And when it comes to direct attackers, 6, 7, 8. 6, 7, 8 I think is your maximum. I think 6 is a pretty good number, so 3 Cobra, 2 Pheasant, 2 Giraffe and 1 Pheasant is a pretty good ratio, but of course you can give and take based on personal preference, so I think that's a very good idea, and you need to keep that in mind, is that your back row should be more than your monsters and your win condition, simply because your back row, if you draw into it, it's not completely useless. Most of it will be stall, so you can at least use it to stall until you get your win condition, which you can't do with a handful of direct attackers, because they can't do anything. They can attack directly and get some effects going, but they can't protect themselves in the long run. But yeah, wow, nearly 10 minutes, and I have to apologise. So if you did find this interesting, like, favourite the video, thanks. And if you have any more questions regarding the what deck, Hopper what, or AggroWatts, I'll be happy to answer and help you with those. So post those in the comments down below as a video response. I'm Jack Clark, the Yugi Musketeer. Annotation at the top left of the screen will take you to a previous video. Annotation at the top right will take you to a future video. If there's not one there will be one there soon. I'm Jack Clark, the Yugi Musketeer. Goodbye.